Can you all see that screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Excellent. Well, so my, as you probably know, my passion is public speaking. I really enjoy it. And one of the things I like anything that you can never get to perfect level, that it's always a journey and you're trying to get better and better, but you never quite reach it. I like things like that. And that Rakesh, is why I like making coffee, because it's a bit like that. I've got a Rancilio coffee machine. It's all manual. So if I do something wrong, my coffee tastes terrible. And it's about getting, you know, the right grind and the right extraction time and a good grinder, and then I get a really lovely coffee. So public speaking is a bit like that, you know, the skills that you learn and then you practice and you get better and better and better, but no one ever does a speech that's perfect. And I think that's one of the things I like about it. There we go. So our question first up is, who is your favorite public speaker? And since we've got a small group, we can ask everybody. Rakesh, who's your favorite public speaker?
Actually, used to be one of my previous boss from my previous company, Paul Middleton. He did spend quite a lot of time in Army Defense, and then he moved into supply chain manager role. I definitely used to enjoy a lot of his public speaking skills. So yeah, okay. I'll probably mention his name for that.
I've got an image of him just yelling at people, but obviously that's not the case.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, there's a lot of good public speakers that actually come out of the Army. There's actually a lot in Toastmasters.
Yeah, wow.
It's an essential skill to communicate succinctly, you know, what you need to say in few words and not have any gray areas that you could imagine on the battlefield. That would be very important. Ash.
I reckon you, Stephen. I reckon with some of the webinars that you can do and just facilitating all of the meetings, that you do generally have that very good, you're very flowing, you're very direct. You know what I mean? You've just got that gift. Whereas I can notice with me, if I'm public speaking, sometimes I can get caught and, you know, I get stuck. But whether you're very direct, you're very flowing, you're very engaging. So I think it's good.
Oh, thanks, Ash. I think we all fall into what comes natural for us, which is what I do. So this sort of thing comes very natural, what I'm doing now. So when I'm in Toastmasters, it's actually a really good platform to try something that you're not naturally good at. And so that might be humorous, you know. It is really hard to be humorous when you're trying to be humorous, if you know what I mean. So because you think, all right, this has got to be funny. Everything's depending on this. If this joke's got to work, and it probably won't work because you're concentrating too much. But I did a humorous speech a couple of meetings ago, which really tested me out, because that's not normally my style. It's more of a professional sort of setting. And also when you see Kyle speak, so he's got this, he's really passionate and really connects with the audience, and I think that comes really naturally for him. And I wish I could grab some of that, because he does that really well. Like Yuki talks about his family, and you can just see that he's so passionate about his topic. So that works really well as well. Gan, who's your favorite public speaker?
Actually, you stole mine. Actually, I was going to say Stephen, but Gary Vaynerchuk. He's a public speaker. I'm not sure if you all know. I can.
Where's he from? Is he Australian?
No, he's not Australian. He's Canadian. He's
okay.
Canadian or American. Even I'm not sure. But yeah, he has a lot of videos about you know, young people, how they should cope up with things around. I think.
Motivational, would you say?
Yeah, motivational. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And Devon, what about you? Who's your favorite public speaker?
Okay, I'll say you, Stephen, yourself, and then Kyle.
Conspiracy.
Yeah, and as you said, Kyle is very passionate, and you are on
Just
the
because
other
I'm the
hand.
president doesn't mean you have to say this, Devon.
No, I mean, I'm saying. So, and then Connor also is good, but before this, one of my client back in Malaysia, he's really good. Yeah, he can really command the meetings, or even he can really run, and even people who doesn't like him, he can make them to listen to him. So he's really very good on that. So yeah, so I have a couple of
I always thought that Bill Clinton was a really good public speaker. Just taking politics out of it, he's an amazing communicator. And when he's talking, you can just see that he's connecting so well with the audience. But obviously, to get to even contesting a presidential election, you have to be a really good communicator. On the other side of politics, Ronald Reagan was a really good communicator, and of course, Barack Obama was an amazing communicator, as is his wife. To me, it's all about the relationships.
Yeah, I was just about to mention Obama family as well. Yeah, I love listening to Barack Obama, and lately I watched that Michelle Obama's Becoming Netflix documentary. So it's amazing.
Yep.
Can I just say something now that we're talking about it? I noticed it. I said something to Mum this morning, actually. I said, what a difference between Barack Obama and Donald Trump, the way they speak, the way they handle themselves. You can definitely notice the difference between the leaders, can't you? I don't know if you've now starting to see the different characteristics.
Yeah.
With Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and then you look at someone like Barack Obama. So
yeah. Look, Trump, he does good deals. This is the way I see it. Donald Trump is a deal maker, so he can make deals. That's what he does. But he is a very poor communicator, and you've just seen him fall on his face so many times because of that.
Anyone watched the debate, the recent? It was hilarious.
Yeah, it was very kindergarten style, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I was like, I can become very argumentative sometimes, but Donald Trump is doing that in front of like millions of people. And he literally didn't allow the moderator to talk. He was on and on. He was like, no, I need to talk.
My favorite bit was when Donald Trump said, "You let him talk that long." It's I just thought it's just like my kids. Anyway, we're going to get this show on the road. So thanks for your input there. This is like an introduction to a Toastmasters Speechcraft workshop. So this is a corporate workshop that Toastmasters offer. It goes over 8 sessions, and it covers all aspects of public speaking. Next year, I'd really like to run this for the committee members, because I think it would be very useful. So that's something that I'll aim for. Public speaking is like an iceberg. There's a lot of hard work that you don't see, particularly early on. So you've got to learn the skills, and then you've got to practice it. And what I've noticed with Toastmasters is that if you don't practice it, you lose it really quickly. So if I see Toastmasters that move away from the organisation and they're not in an environment where they're practicing their public speaking, and then they come back a few years later, it's amazing how much they've lost. And they tend to make it up fairly quickly because it is in there, but you do lose it. So the key things is that once you've learnt the skills, is that grab every opportunity you can to get in front of people, even if it feels uncomfortable. You know what they say, if it feels uncomfortable, that's a reason why you should do it, because you're pushing yourself and getting yourself out of your comfort zone. It reminds me of the Seinfeld episode. I don't know if you've seen it, but they spoke about how the biggest fear that people have is public speaking. And in fact, if at a funeral, they would prefer to be in the casket than giving the eulogy, which I thought was hilarious. That's a Seinfeld joke. That's not from me. But it's, you feel uncomfortable, but you got to push yourself, and you get better and better at it. One thing we need to do is to understand who our audience is. So if we're giving a presentation, we need to know who the audience is. For any SCLAA event, we're given a list prior, and we know who the person is, what company they're from, and usually what role they have as well. So that's quite important, because you would give a different speech to students, maybe university students or high school students, to a CEO or a C-suite level presentation. And in fact, you would give a different presentation to a CEO compared to a CFO, compared to a CIO. So if we were talking to a lot of CEOs, we'd be talking about really big picture stuff and how the company can move forward with a particular maybe technology. But if we were talking to a CFO, we'd be talking about the finance side. How much is all this going to cost, and what is the return on the investment? So we invest this much and we save this much over this many years. And if we're talking to a CIO, we'd be talking about the nuts and bolts of how it all works and what platform it's going to sit on and the very technical aspects of it. So it's very important to understand who's in the audience. And if there's a mixture, then that makes it a little bit hard, but we need to offer a little bit of everything for everyone. The key point for the presenter is that if you don't know who the audience is, then you need to ask that question. All right, because we need to know as much about our audience as possible so we can tailor the presentation to suit. And if we go to the what, we need to know and understand what we're trying to achieve with the presentation. So are we informing them, explaining a concept? Are we educating them? Are we trying to influence them in a certain direction? Is it entertainment? So it's fair enough to do a presentation that's simply entertainment. So it might be a humorous speech, for instance. Or are we trying to convince them to a particular point of view? So we should be very clear what we're trying to do. Because if we're trying to convince our audience to do something, then at the end, we might have a call to action. So it might be, you might be talking about a charity and the big benefits they're doing, and the call to action would be to jump onto this website and donate or sponsor me or whatever it is, but there might be that call to action at the end. But you should be clear what you're trying to achieve so that your whole presentation is to that end, and that you can then achieve that objective. Because quite often we can just wander along and talk about a subject, but there's no purpose. We didn't know what we were trying to achieve, and therefore there was no call to action, or we'd have no way of knowing if we achieved it at the end of the day. That all make sense? I'm going to cover quite a bit here, but there's going to be 3 main points that I want you to remember. So don't be too worried about a lot of the details. I'm just sort of giving some context, but there'll be 3 points in the presentation that are very clear and easy to action that you can use. So look out for those. I'll highlight them. As far as the skills go in public speaking, I think there's probably nothing better to look at than a Toastmasters judging ballot. So in Toastmasters, there is many facets to Toastmasters. One of them is contests. Not everyone's interested in contests, and other members of Toastmasters live for the contest. So this is where you go into a speech contest and you can win the club contest. You move up to the area contest, and if you win that, you go up to division level, then district level, then regional level, and then the global level, where you can compete to be the world champion of public speaking, which is quite a big thing. If you win that, that is then your full-time job, because you'd be in big demand as a keynote speaker at that point. So this is the judging ballot that they use. And what's interesting is it has all the skills down the left-hand side and the weighting. So if you can see under the word excellent there's a number. So that's the weighting that they give each particular skill. So they're in order there. And if we look at the first one, it's speech development. So this is the most important thing about a speech, all right? So it's so important, I won't cover it here. I'll cover it at the end in some more detail. The next one is effectiveness. So did your speech achieve the purpose that it was designed to achieve? All right, so if it was a call to action or you're trying to convince, did you do that? And it also involves in the audience. So was the audience interested in what you had to say, and what was the reception? So if it was a humorous speech, did they laugh? Did they find it enjoyable? If it was to educate, was this something that that they needed to know, and you saw them taking notes, and they seemed very engaged. Speech value. So this boils down to, was it valuable for the audience? If this was something they'd already heard and had been covered many times before and is on every second headline of the newspaper, maybe it wasn't valuable to them. Was this a unique way of putting forward an idea? All right, and was it logical? Did it have a logical path? The next one is physical, which covers a lot of things, and I guess probably most people would think this would be up more in the importance, but it's not. It's about halfway, but I think still very important. So most communications, you may have heard this before. Most communication isn't actually verbal; it is physical. So it's quite important that you get the physical aspect of a speech right. And that could be your gestures. So gestures can go wrong in a couple of ways. Firstly, there could be negative gestures. So you may just have your hands in your pockets. There could be simply no gestures, which would be just your hands by your side, which would be better than incorrect gestures, by the way. Or you could have gestures, but the gestures aren't matching what you're saying. So you may be talking about a very serious, emotional topic, and you have big, bold gestures, which wouldn't really suit. So what we need is gestures that matches what you're saying. So if we're talking about a big concept, we might be talking about a world view, then we'd be going like this. If we were talking about something emotional, then maybe we'd be going like this to our chest, highlighting our heart. So it's important to think about that when you're starting off. If you find gestures hard, if they don't come naturally, and some people they just come naturally, but if they don't come naturally, then the important thing is that you don't do negative gestures. So just keep your hands by your side would be a good way to start, and maybe introduce a couple of gestures. Also the speaking area, so you'll have a stage, so be aware of where the stage is, where your platform is, and think about how you could use that. Because if you're talking to a group of people, everyone needs to feel the love, so to speak. And there's various ways you can use a stage. You could, for instance, if you're talking about different points of view, and if we go back to the presidential elections, we could move over this side of the stage when we're talking about the Democrats, and to demonstrate the opposing view, we could then walk over to the other side of the stage to talk about the Republicans. And then we could move back to the center for the conclusion, and then to talk about what my view is. So this is what the Democrats say, this is what the Republicans say on this side of the stage, and then you return to the center and talk about what my view is. So there's various things you can do. If you are talking about an emotional subject, again, you could move forward at the stage, get closer to the people, to the audience, and lower your tone. So there's some effective ways, and what you're doing is it's all about supporting what you're saying. So it's all supporting and making that an emotional connection with the audience by the way you're portraying yourself on the stage. Voice, this one is quite often missed, but it can be quite important. So if you want to emphasize a certain phrase, then you could say it very, very slowly, and then give a nice long pause afterwards. And then you might like to repeat it very, very slowly. And then you pause just until you start to feel a little bit uncomfortable. So always go past that point. and then commence. So that's like bolding and highlighting something if you're writing it. So it just emphasizes that that point. And you've got volume, as I said. If sensitive subject, you could lower your tone, lower your volume. Or if it's something exciting, then you can use some volume, really project your voice. Directness, assurance, and enthusiasm. So this is this shows the audience that you're passionate about your subject, that you're self-assured, and some of it is how you stand on the stage. So, you know, it's great to stand with your feet slightly apart and shoulders back and look self-assured. Even if you're not actually self-assured and you're trembling inside, to make yourself do that portrays to the audience that you know what you're talking about and this is a person to listen to. And then the enthusiasm. So if we go back to Kyle, always full of enthusiasm when he's in front of the camera or in front of an audience. Very, very important that you're not just sort of droning on and making the motions, because the audience very quickly picks up on that. Appropriateness to speech purpose and audience. So the audience and matching it with the speech purpose is very important. So we wouldn't give a talk on high finance to primary school children, to give an extreme example. So did the way you present the speech, was that suitable for the audience you had and the type of speech that you were trying to give? So were you trying to convince people to do something? Well, if you were, was the type of speech you gave appropriate for that? And lastly, correctness of grammar, pronunciation, and word selection. This sometimes takes some time. What I often do is I'll run through a speech verbally, and there'll be a few words that probably don't sound right, or I could use different words, and I just think about some words that would sound better or be more concise and get the message across better. So I usually tweak some words and move them around, or have, you know, 3 words that start with the same letter. It's called a triad if you really want to emphasize a point, you know, big, bold, and beautiful, something like that, all starting with the same letter, bang, 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 to get a message across. And they take some time to think about. It usually doesn't happen on the fly, but it's something that you can tweak later on once you've got the main structure. So that's the basic skills of public speaking, and I don't expect you in this session to be a master of all those, but it's good to be aware of what makes up a good speech, I think. All right, so this is one of my main points that I'd like you to remember for your next speech, and that is the structure of any speech. Whether it is a prepared speech, whether it's a humorous speech, whether it's an impromptu speech, all must have this same structure. So we need an opening, we need a main body or a middle, and we need a closing. All right. We don't just want to start off in the middle and then finish without any close. So we always need that opening, the main body, and the closing. And there's a saying that you tell them what you're going to say, you tell them, and then you tell them what you said. And that sounds a little bit repetitive, but it works really well. And it's all about getting your point across, getting your message across. So at the end of the day, the audience, if you ask them the next day, what was my speech about, that they would be able to tell you exactly what you intended that message to be. Because that's really your aim, is you've got a message and you want it to be memorable. So if you ask them the next day, they could tell you what that is. So tell them what you're going to say, tell them, and then tell them what you said, or a summary at the end. So let's have a look at the opening. So the opening is quite important. So that introduction of your speech, because if you lose your audience in that first 2 minutes, then you've lost them for the rest of the speech. So even if you have a brilliant middle, if you've lost them in the opening, people will start switching off and being distracted and not paying attention. So very important to have a powerful opening. And there's a few ways you can do this, and these are some examples, because right from the start, you've got to get their attention and get the audience thinking. So you can have audience participation. So get the audience to do something. And you've probably been to seminars where the first thing they get the audience to do may be to stand up. Maybe they've been sitting down, been through a few speeches already. They get them to stand up and do some exercises, or stand up and introduce yourself to the person next to them. There's a whole lot of different things that that you could do. So audience participation right from the start is a good way to get them focused. A powerful question. So right from the start, a big, powerful question to get people thinking. What is your why? Why are you here? And just say nothing while they think about that. Just give a big pause, right? A big, bold question. Quotes, it's another one, a good quote to get people thinking. A shocking statement. So this is a common one too. So this is where you start the speech in the introduction with a shocking statement. Something like, every day in the world, 6 million tons of plastic bottles are dumped into our oceans. And pause. And then you give your environmental speech. A story. So stories are wonderful in any speech. They're memorable, and they're a way that people can relate a story to that main message. So it makes it very memorable. So you can always start with a story. And humour, nothing better to connect with the audience than having some humour there. You may need to work on that. And as I said, the harder you try with humour, the more unlikely it's going to happen. So yeah, I think it's all about the timing, but humour is a great way to make that connection, particularly in the introduction. And audio-visual impact. So you no doubt would have been to some keynotes, some big corporate events where before the keynote speaker comes out, they have a spectacular audio-visual introduction, and it's exciting. There's colours, there's big, bass sounds, and it gets everyone anticipating and enthusiastic about the speaker that it's about to come on. So that's another way to do that. So some keys there, very important, the opening. Going back to the structure of the speech, so we've heard that the opening, main body, and closing, we need 3 parts to your speech. The second point that I want you to remember, and again, it's easy to implement. So when you're constructing your speech, what works very well is to have 3 points in that middle area. All right, now, these are the points you want your audience to be left with. And these 3 points after the speech, you should be able to, the audience should be able to tell you what those 3 points are. So your main point 1, your main point 2, and your main point 3. Now, you may have 10 points that you want to talk about. The problem is that if you tell them 10 points, they won't remember any of them. So you are way better picking your 3 big points out of those 10 and going with that. All right, I would stretch it to 4 if you have to, but 3 is usually the key number. All right, so if you're talking about a subject, what are the 3 points you're trying to get across? And the third thing I want to leave you with is the length of time of your presentation. So sometimes this isn't flexible, but in a case where it is flexible and you can decide on how long your speech is going to be, I would recommend 20 minutes. So much research has been done, and 20 minutes is the ideal time for an audience to give an engaging presenter their full attention for 20 minutes. And if you look at any TED Talk, that's 18 to 20 minutes, every single one of them, because that's the perfect length of time to have full engagement and to get a message across. Now, on many occasions, you're asked to do a longer presentation than 20 minutes. And 40 minutes is a common one, 60 minutes is a common one. And if you can, it's great to break it up. So you'd have a 20-minute section, and then you might have some sort of activity after 20 minutes or interaction. Even if it's a webinar, you could have a poll just to get some engagement and the audience doing something, and then go into the next 20 minutes. All right, so you can break it up a bit. But if it's within your control, 20 minutes is a really nice time frame. All right, so there's 3 things: the 3 parts to a speech: opening, a middle, and a close. 3 points in the middle, easy to remember, and a 20-minute time frame. And that's the very basics of public speaking. And I think those 3 points are just things that you can really easily integrate into your next presentation. Anyone got any questions at all?
Yes, it's Stephen Jake here. Great talk.
Oh, hi, Jake. I didn't know you were there.
Yeah, sorry, I snuck on. So I missed the very start, but could call most of it. Just in terms of pre-speech hacks, do you have any sort of best practices before you actually start the speech to boost confidence, or just to get yourself in the right mood?
Yeah, well, practice makes it easier. So something that I've noticed over the years at Toastmasters is that new members, they need to do 6 or 7 speeches before they're comfortable enough to actually think about the skills they're learning. So up till 6 or 7 speeches for most people, not all, but for most people, they are thinking mostly about how nervous they are. And a lot of the skills aren't being paid attention to. And something happens around the 6th or 7th speech that they're doing every month or so, that they've done it enough that their anxiety is low enough that they can start concentrating on the skills. So my advice would be to, every time you have a public speaking opportunity, is to take it, snap it up, be the first one to put up your hand, and that will give you practice. As far as on the day, I can tell you what I do. I usually have a hot drink, but nothing with milk, because milk tends to make my voice go funny. So like a warm cup of tea is usually what I have. So that's good for the voice. And I can tell you something that Bill Clinton used to always do. So as I said, I'm a fan of Bill Clinton's public speaking ability anyway. Yeah. He would always say, before he went on stage, he would say showtime, right? And that was the cue that no matter what had happened in the day, no matter all these pressures of being president, that when he said those words showtime, that it was all about the audience and that presentation. So everything, when he said that was it. Everything else was at the back of his mind, was all about the audience. And I think that's quite important, because sometimes we can get caught up in what do I look like, and how am I performing, and what is my next line, when really it's about the audience. And the real masters of public speaking can completely adjust their speech halfway through if the audience isn't responding. So if the audience isn't quite what they thought and they need a bit more humor, then they'll do a bit more humor. If it's more of a technical audience than they anticipated, then they might deep dive into some of the technicalities on the fly. But as far as leading into a speech, those moments before, you just got to get yourself into a mindset and put everything else aside, and go out there with the right frame of mind. And that can be easier said than done sometimes, because sometimes you have technical difficulties that you just want to pull your hair out. So the projector isn't working, my clicker's got a flat battery. At the end of the day, you've just got to put it all behind you, work out whatever has to happen. And if you've got to tell someone to turn the slides because your clicker's not working, then you've got to do it.
Yeah, true.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. And just one quick follow-up is, Just in terms of webinars and Zoom and so forth, do you find that there's anything particular that you have been concentrating on more, or you've been observing good speakers concentrate on more that you wouldn't see normally in face-to-face meetings?
Yes. Well, the challenge, and for me, the challenge is looking at the camera. Okay, so if I look at the camera, which I am now, that's my best look for you, because I'm looking in your eyes, I'm connecting with you, and I'm coming across a lot more sincere than if I actually look at the screen and to see your reaction. So the problem with Zoom is that if I look at the camera, I can't see what your reactions are. I can't see how you're relating to the speech, but it's better for me to look at the camera. So the rule is to look at the camera, because that's quite important to connect with the audience. But I find that hard because I end up looking at the audience, which is what I'm trying to do. But yeah. So look at the camera. I have blue lights on my camera and everything. It's made really easy, but I still find it hard.
Yeah. Cool, thank you.
Hey, Stephen, I just got a quick question. If you're on stage, is it good to move around when you're on stage? Is that, or is it good to sit down, or is it, what's the best way to really engage the audience if you're presenting?
So the best way is to move around.
Okay.
Definitely. So I guess if you're feeling a bit insecure, you may feel more secure if you're behind a lectern, because that's sort of like a barrier between you and the audience. But the audience would prefer for you to be front and center and connecting to them. Particularly at the start, something that's really effective, particularly if they're a little bit noisy, is to just stand right in the center of the stage and just don't say anything, but present yourself really confidently. So your feet are apart and your chest is back, and you're scanning the audience, you're looking at their eyes, you're moving around the audience, but you're saying nothing. And that builds anticipation for the audience. They can see you there, they can see you're standing there quite confidently, and it also is a way to make the background noise die down as well, because you're not going to start talking until they're quiet, right? And you do it even if it feels uncomfortable, and it just builds anticipation, and then you can fly into a really cool opening. But it's it's really quite effective if it's done well. And as far as stage use goes, think about how you could use that stage, like I was saying before. You know, whether you've got different points of an argument, so you're looking at one argument, the other side of the argument, and then giving your view. Or it may be a timeline. So you may be talking about your life, and on this side of the stage is when you're a child, and then you move over to the present day, and then you're looking forward to when you're an old person, and then you come to the center and give a conclusion. So there's all different ways that you can use the stage, and particularly moving forward to talk about something that's quite emotional. You just get closer to the audience. That's quite effective as well. So it's important not to have meaningless motion though. So sometimes you see people just walking around the stage, but it doesn't mean anything. So in my opinion, you're better just to stay still if you're going to do that. But you can use the stage to your benefit, and even to talk to different areas. Like if it's a big area that you're talking to, like hundreds of people, everyone needs to feel as though that you've looked at them in the eye and spoken to them. All right. So it's a tendency to try and just look down the middle. But if you go over to one side and you address that side of the audience, and look around, and then come back over to this side and address that side of the audience, and then come back to the middle, that's quite effective as well. But yeah, if you can use the stage, it's all supporting your argument, supporting your speech.
Thank you.
Okay. You done any public speaking, Gun?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes.
We were talking about Toastmasters the other day.
Yeah, I did log in yesterday, but I don't know, but the meeting didn't start yesterday. It was supposed to be first Wednesday, but it didn't happen. I emailed them again. So yes, I am going to improve my skills. I've done a bit of presentations in uni, and that's about it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so Port Melbourne Toastmasters is just behind Garn's house, I believe.
Yeah.
So when they actually are meeting again face to face, it'll be really convenient.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the face to face. I think it's more, it builds more confidence than Zoom, I feel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So.
What about you, Rakesh?
I actually tried to reach out to Vic Uni in Werribee because the Toastmasters in Werribee is located in Vic Uni, and then for some reason I've emailed them multiple times and no response at all in terms of my interest to join. But I've definitely been to Fitzroy Toastmasters because it was convenient for me back then.
Oh, okay.
That
Yeah,
was the
I
start
know a
of
few
my
people there.
Yeah, so that was almost my start of my Toastmasters journey early this year, like late last year. I've done 2 sessions, and then somehow the timing didn't work because it's a Monday, 7:30 to 9:30 in the night, in the evening. So it was like almost, I finished my work at 4:30. I have to do something in Fitzroy for 3 hours to get to that session. So yeah, unfortunately, and then I moved to Telstra building in Burke Street Toastmasters. And I went to that, and I've done 1 session there, and it was a lot inconvenient because of parking. And the second thing is, since it's a Telstra building, they had a government office in there too. So there was a lot of security checkup once you actually need to get into the building. So someone needs to come downstairs to take you upstairs and all that thing happened. So kind of I really tried hard for Toastmasters 4 times and it didn't really work out. And then I tried Werribee and no one responded back. So, but besides that,
they're community clubs, so it just depends who's in charge of their membership. You know, so obviously someone like Jake isn't in charge of their membership. He'd be all over.
So hence, it's yeah. But in terms of general public speaking, I've done quite a few, mostly to known audience, like the warehouse team I used to work with before previously. But since prior to SCLAA, I've done a little bit, and then I've done quite a lot of warehouse tours to open like, a lot of outside audience. So yeah. Again, I think it's mostly the nervousness. As much as I prepare myself and it's like, yep, I'm all good to go, it's showtime. There is that slight nervousness you always have. Not that it's going to break, but somehow it just creeps into yourself, myself especially.
Yeah. So a little bit of nervousness is good, right? So you don't want to be at a stage. And I've actually seen this, like some Toastmasters that have been doing it for like 40 years or something. You know, sometimes they are just too casual about it, you know, and they haven't prepared properly, and it just comes across, you know, that it's just like they're, I don't know, talking to their partner or something, and there's that, it doesn't have that edge, you know. So personally, I think there should always be a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of edge to your speech, but you don't want it to be debilitating, you know. You don't want it to affect your performance, you know.
Yeah.
And but you think that would be the area you struggle the most in, is the anxiety?
Yes. And also sometimes when I talk anything familiar, I'll go really quick because I'm so familiar with the topic. I get into an unconscious mindset that the audience are from different backgrounds, so they may not be connected. So I tend to go real quick. So most of the time I usually have a caution to myself, slow down somewhere. So so that's the thing I noticed a lot in my own presentations.
Something you can do is if you've spoken about a particular topic, right, and then you could just say to the audience, does that make sense? And just wait for someone to say, yes, it does. So that's a way of slowing you down and making sure that they've taken that first topic in. If there's any questions they can ask you before you move on to the next topic.
That's great. And I like the way you structured this presentation as well, and it's very clear that these 3 points, like now I've take away this opening, main body and closing. And it's quite good actually, the way you structured this, plus the message you gave is tell them what you're going to say, you tell them, and then you tell them, conclude it what you actually said already. So I think it's great. Yeah, it's a speech successfully delivered, Stephen. I got those 3 points now. So you ask me next week or week after or next month, I'll tell you 3 points.
Yeah, it's just about like that introduction, telling them what you're going to say. It's what we call signposting. So the audience wants to know what to expect, right? So you're telling them what to expect, what the purpose is, and what you're going to be covering. Okay, so that's quite important. And then they're sort of anticipating that, and then you give it to them, and then the conclusion is all about making sure that that message, that one or two lines, is right in their minds. So you're reminding them the key messages that you're trying to get across, or maybe it's an action point, some action you want them to take. So, what about you, Devon?
Yeah, I joined Toastmasters back in Malaysia. Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, 2006 or 2007. And I only went for 2 or 3 sessions. Then after that, yeah, was nervous, scared, and then with work. I mean, work is the reason, but the real reason is nervous, scared. So didn't follow with them. Other than that, yeah, giving presentations to my clients and speaking to my team members. So that kind of speeches I used to give back in Malaysia. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think you struggle with the most?
Mostly I'll struggle basically what is this words. Sometimes I don't get the right words when I try to communicate and get the message across to the audience. So that's one of which I have to really look into and practice. Yeah.
So in a prepared speech, you could think about some of those words prior. Just have them up here.
Yeah.
Here are the keywords.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know about that. So now, since your advice, yeah, I will do some research on that. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. And impromptu speaking is a completely separate thing, so that has its own skills. But I think probably impromptu speaking is the one that you use every day. So if you're talking to people trying to get a message across, the boss calls you into his office. These situations are where you're using impromptu speaking. So again, it's you still need that introduction, the body, and a conclusion. But I think day to day you would use those skills a lot more. And it's funny, like some people are really good at prepared speeches, and some people are really good at impromptu speeches. But it tends to come naturally one way or the other.
Hey, Stephen.
Yeah.
Can I just ask something? How do you keep the audience engaged? How do you keep that as a continual, or is it just, and you know, some people can drift off, some people, I don't know if with all your experience with Toastmasters, how engaged the audience can be once someone starts their speech, and how to keep that constant engagement.
So it's a lot of things. It's not just one thing, and it all builds together to get that connection. So they have to feel connected to you. They have to maybe have an emotional connection to what you're talking about. You have to be engaging as a presenter and making them think, you know, so they're not just sitting back like they're watching television, that you're making them think about the topic. And at the end of the day, it has to be relevant to them. So it has to be a speech that's relevant to the audience. So it doesn't matter how engaging you were. If you were speaking about high finance to primary school students, they couldn't care less, you know. So it has to match your audience.
Yeah.
And then it's all those skills coming together. Keeps them there.
Okay.
So engagement is good, and that's why for webinars, because you're limited in how you can engage with the audience, is like the polling function is quite good. And you know, even if you're doing a survey, you know, how many people are members of SCLAA and how many are not members at this webinar. It's just a way of getting them to engage and think about it and see the results. So that in itself is a way of keeping them engaged. And you can have a few polls throughout a webinar.
Yeah.
Stories are really good as well. So
Yeah.
stories are memorable. And if they're personal stories, they're easy to remember, which is good too. And if it's, you might know the standard story circle. So there's like a clock face for a standard story where you have a hero, and then the hero has a challenge, and then the hero falls down. So he goes into what we call the abyss, right? And it looks like there's no way he could get out of this abyss. He's gone, but he climbs, he crawls out, he climbs up, and then there's a victory.
I've never heard of this circle before. This is the first time I've heard of the circle.
You have a look at most movies, you know, for the past 100 years have followed that. If you think of Star Wars, you know, there's the heroes, there's the challenge, there's the insurmountable odds that they're ever going to get out of this, but they claw their way out, and then there's their victory at the end. You know, it's a very typical format, and it works every single time, and it's very memorable, and it's a way that you can get a message across. So it's good to know that that formula for a story. And personal stories are really good too, because they're coming from the heart. You know, Kyle talks about his life in Ireland and his dad and the trucking business there and how that relates to SCLAA. That's storytelling, and it's coming straight from his heart, and we all know that. So it's very effective. And then we can relate to that. If it's something like, you know, we've all have or had parents, and we can relate to that, to the relationship he's got with his dad. So any story that the audience can relate to works very well as well.
You've just grown my awareness, Stephen. Thank you very much.
All I'd say is stick at Toastmasters if you've got the time. Rakesh probably doesn't have the time anymore.
Oh, what's that?
Storytelling.
Oh, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Okay, so there you go. Now, so this is a book called Building a Story Brand, and it kind of decodes how you tell a great story and how it's been done over hundreds of years in all the movies. Mm-hmm. And it's just gives a rough, simple, basic chart. I'll read it out to you. It starts with the character has a problem. It meets a guide who gives them a plan, and then calls for an action, which ends in a success that helps to prevent the failure. And that's it. The story is finished. And this is the same 7 points repeated in lots of different formats and shapes, and it always worked.
What's that book called?
It's a story, Building a Story Brand.
And I can definitely vouch for Donald Miller. So I've been following him by coincidence. I know, Rakesh, you mentioned it, I think last meeting.
Yeah.
I've been following him for many years. In fact, I was almost tempted to go to one of his conferences in the US, like literally get in a plane and say, right, this is the purpose of my trip, is to have this, I think it was a 1-week workshop on Story Brand. I never did it, but it would have been fun. But yeah, no, I like him. He's got some really good ideas.
Yeah.
And very commercial as well. You know, it's like you can apply it to your business.
Yeah, actually, for a very business-oriented book as well. So if you want to read it through for applying it to your new business or any startup or something, it's got some clear message that you want your audience to listen. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. No more questions? I think we're, what was 7:23?
It was a really great presentation. I loved it.
Yeah, awesome. Definitely, it was great.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
It's a pleasure. Jan, I'll be tracking your Toastmasters progress. I was just going to say, keep at it with Toastmasters. I mean, you do have to find the right clubs. They vary a lot. So if you go to one, they're not all the same. There's corporate, like the Telstra would have been a corporate club. There's community clubs, which are a bit more casual. So sure, move around. You can go to a club as a guest and just sample it and make sure it's a good fit for you. Some are very formal and structured, others aren't. So find one that feels like it's a good fit. But it's just a way of practicing. So you learn the skills, and then there's a mechanism to practice it every couple of weeks, which really helps. And I'm fortunate that my job means that I get to practice at work as well, which makes it easy too.
I think it's a good skill. I mean, it's an essential skill everyone should have. So if you're working, and especially I think if I'm going to have a business of my own, I definitely need to do that a lot more than needed. So yeah.
Well, it's a skill of getting a message across. So even if I'm just talking to you, Gan, the skills you learn are about getting what's up here over to you in a concise and succinct way. And that's important. It doesn't matter if you're a dad talking to your kids.
Good.
You know, it's all the same. And what I should mention before we go, we've got 5 minutes, is that a very important part of Toastmasters is evaluation. So every speech you do, you get evaluated. And it's important that the evaluator tells you what you did right, as well as what you did, where you could be improved. And it's always 2 points of praise and 1 point of improvement, because you need to know what you're doing well as where you can correct, because you need to keep doing what you're doing well and to learn where your strengths are and to build confidence. You know, so that's quite important. But that applies not to just speeches. You know, that applies to everything. That applies to work. You know, you may be a manager at work and talking to your subordinates, you know, telling them what they're doing right is just as important as telling them where they can be better. You may be a dad or a mum talking to your kids, the same thing. You know, if you just tell them all the time all the things they're doing wrong, they're going to lack confidence and have a very negative mindset, you know. So it's important always to tell them what they're doing right and what you're proud of them for as well. So that's something I got out of Toastmasters. I'd never had that exposure before Toastmasters, but I can see that you can apply it to all different areas of your life.
Stephen, can you be my speech coach?
You have to join Toastmasters, Ash.